My parents sent me to prison for something I did not do. When the gates finally opened, they were waiting outside with soft smiles and fake tears. But I did not stop. I did not hug them. I did not even slow down. I walked straight past their outstretched arms and stepped into a black car with tinted windows, because the version of me they betrayed was gone, and the one who walked out had a plan. The last morning inside Oakwood felt strangely quiet. No shouting, no metal doors slamming near my block, just the smell of disinfectant and old concrete. I sat on the lower bunk and stared at the wall behind it, covered in thin scratch marks only I understood. I made them one day at a time with a snapped plastic spoon, counting every sunrise I lost. 1,095 lines. 3 full years stolen and turned into a number system only a caged person would create. I touched the final mark and felt calm, not angry. Anger is loud. This was something colder. I used to run a technology company that started in a garage with 2 folding chairs and a borrowed server rack. I built it through sleepless nights and impossible risks until it was worth more money than anyone in my family had ever seen. They used to call me the miracle. Then they called me the problem. My parents stood in court and described me like a stranger. My brother spoke about my temper. His wife cried on command. Their story was clean, organized, and false. Mine was messy and true, which is why it lost. People think prison breaks you in dramatic ways. It doesn't. It wears you down slowly, like water on stone. You learn to listen more than you talk. You learn who trades favors and who trades lies. You learn how systems work because you are trapped inside one. I spent my time studying rules, appeals, financial trails, and every decision that led to that courtroom. While they celebrated control of my company, I mapped their weaknesses. When the guard told me it was time, I stood up without looking back at the bunk. Some chapters deserve no farewell. Outside, cameras flashed near the fence line, pointed at my family. They expected a reunion scene. Instead, they watched me choose a different door, a different ally, and a different ending. This is not a comeback story. It is a correction. The storm that night was more than rain. It was the start of everything being twisted against me. Briar was in the passenger seat, her hands gripping the door handle as tightly as she gripped her story later. We had fought about money and loyalty. She said I cared more about the company than family. I told her she didn't understand the pressure, the responsibility of keeping a business alive. Words flew, but nothing could have prepared me for what came next. She yanked the wheel. The car spun, tires screaming against the wet road. Everything blurred. Airbags burst. Metal bent. I remember thinking that life could turn in an instant, but not that my life would turn because of lies. At the hospital, doctors were kind but firm. They told her she had lost the baby, a tragedy neither of us could change. I sat beside her, silent, grief-heavy and raw. Then the story shifted like sand through fingers. She told the police I had done it on purpose, that I had acted in anger, that the crash was my fault. Footage from the dashcam, the one piece of truth that could have saved me, was labeled corrupted. Suddenly, reality was not mine. My parents, worried about reputation and an opportunity to favor Jace, stood behind her version without hesitation. They spoke with conviction, their voices calm, rehearsed. My younger brother, Kieran, once trusted to manage numbers, painted me as greedy and vindictive, claiming financial motives. All 4 of them aligned perfectly, leaving me alone, painted as the villain in my own life. Their unity was cold, calculated, and precise. I was left outside the circle, accused and isolated. It was not just betrayal, it was an orchestrated performance. Everyone played their part, the loving sister, the protective mother, the reasonable father, the competent brother. Only I was missing, only I had to defend myself against a perfect story that wasn't mine. The world saw a reckless heiress, incapable of control, while I saw the cracks in their act, the faint glimpses of panic behind calm eyes. Every word they spoke in court, every glance they exchanged, confirmed how meticulously they had planned my downfall. They didn't just want me convicted. They wanted to erase my presence, my achievements, my identity. As I replayed that night in my mind, the thunder outside seemed almost mocking. The storm mirrored the chaos they had created inside my life. Their lies were loud, but the truth, buried under deceit and fear, was steady and unshakable. I had lost control of the narrative, but I had not lost the ability to fight back. What they saw as my weakness, I saw as the first step in taking back everything. The accident, the lies, the betrayal. They were the beginning, not the end. And I would make sure everyone who trusted those stories realized how wrong they were. Truth has a way of catching up, and when it does, it leaves no room for forgiveness. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and false sympathy. The air was heavy, thick with the weight of every lie carefully rehearsed. My mother sobbed in a way that seemed almost practiced, each tear a prop to frame me as jealous, petty, and dangerous. My father spoke with precision, listing my supposed flaws as if reading from a script, showing no hint of warmth or hesitation. Jace stumbled through his words, a mix of nerves and fear, while Briar sat in a wheelchair, her voice trembling but calculated, painting me as reckless and cruel. The jury watched, the public watched, and I felt the world tilt against me. My lawyer tried, but he was exhausted, worn down by their carefully crafted narrative. His arguments felt small, drowned out by the volume of their conviction and my guilt. The evidence against me was thin, circumstantial, but the performance made it feel real. Everyone wanted a villain, and they decided I was perfect for the role. The gavel struck, and my life was handed over in a whisper of injustice. 3 years of my life were taken, not because I was guilty, but because my own blood had chosen to betray me. It was cold, calculated, and complete. I remember the day they came to visit in prison. It was brief, a single meeting arranged in a sterile room with glass between us. My father leaned forward, his eyes steady, offering a deal like a business transaction rather than a plea for reconciliation. He wanted my control of the company, my shares, in exchange for promises that sounded hollow: early parole, support, leniency. The offer was meant to break me, to test if the thread of familial loyalty still existed. My mother watched silently, her expression unreadable, and my brother shifted uneasily, sensing my resistance. I looked at them, really looked, and saw not the family I once loved, but strangers who had plotted my downfall. The warmth I once felt was gone, replaced by clarity and cold understanding. "I'm not signing anything," I said, my voice steady, firm, leaving no room for negotiation. "Consider this goodbye." In that moment, I severed the last connection they had left intact. The ties of trust, of loyalty, of shared history snapped. I walked away not as a victim, but as someone who had seen the betrayal and refused to participate. The silence after my words was louder than any argument. They had given me the role of the villain, but I had reclaimed the only thing they could not take, my resolve. In that small room, I learned that forgiveness was a choice I would not make, and that vengeance would be a path walked with deliberate steps, quiet patience, and unwavering focus. The trial had ended, but my story was just beginning, and every action from that point forward would be mine alone. The gates of Oakwood swung open, sunlight hitting the concrete in sharp lines. My family waited, smiling for cameras, holding white lilies like a scene from a movie. My mother's voice called out, warm and rehearsed, "Welcome home, darling." I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. Their words fell into the air behind me, meaningless, empty gestures from people who had spent years plotting my downfall. The past 3 years had stripped me of innocence, but they hadn't touched my determination. A black town car waited at the curb, sleek and quiet. The door opened, revealing Silas Thorne, a man whose reputation preceded him. He had turned down my brother's attempts to hire him 3 times, yet here he was, ready to help me reclaim everything they had taken. "Your war room is ready, Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice firm, carrying just enough weight to make everyone nearby notice. I nodded once and stepped inside, closing the door on more than just my parents. I closed it on the betrayal, the courtroom, and the prison walls that had tried to define me. The car slid smoothly into traffic, a silent separation from the family that had failed me. As we drove, the city unfolded around us. Skyscrapers gleamed, indifferent to the dramas of a single family, but perfect for the kind of plan I had in mind. I had spent months envisioning this moment, tracing every weakness, every lie, every way to turn their trust against them. The world outside moved on, unaware that the battle had already begun in quiet ways no one could see. The image my family had tried to control, the public story of a reckless heiress broken by her own kin, was about to be rewritten. Silas handed me a folder, thick with documents, court motions, and evidence. Each page was a step toward reclaiming what was mine and exposing the truth. The ride felt calm, but beneath that calm was a tension that hummed like electricity. I was not just walking away from my family that day, I was stepping into a different world, one where I dictated the rules. They had expected tears, hugs, gratitude. Instead, they got my absence, a quiet refusal to participate in their narrative. Their shock was a luxury I could afford. Their confusion would be a tool. By the time we reached the destination, the gates and the street behind us were just lines in a memory. The reunion they had envisioned never happened. Cameras captured faces frozen in disbelief, unaware that the story they wanted to frame would no longer include them as heroes or victims. I was moving forward, and every mile was a reminder that nothing would ever return to the way it had been. My freedom was not a gift. It was the first move in a game they could never win, a calculated beginning that they would soon understand. The building we entered did not have a name on the front, only tinted glass and a silent lobby. Security opened the elevator with a private code, and we rose without stopping. This was not an office anyone could walk into. This was a place built for quiet strategy. When the doors opened, the apartment looked more like a command center than a home. Screens lined one wall. Folders were stacked in careful rows. Everything felt prepared, like they had been expecting this day as much as I had. A woman stood by the long table, calm and focused. This was Odessa Reed. Her background was in deep financial investigations, the kind that untangled hidden money and buried records. She didn't waste words or offer sympathy. She gave me a short nod, then turned a monitor toward me filled with charts, timelines, and transaction trails. While I was locked away, she had been tracing every major move connected to my company and my personal holdings. Nothing emotional, just facts and patterns. She explained how control over my finances had been shifted using emergency authority claims and selective court filings. Signatures were pushed through during the weeks after my conviction, when I had no way to object. Layers of approvals made it look legal on the surface, but the timing and routing told a different story. It was structured to look protective while actually transferring power. Every shortcut they took was now highlighted in red. Papers were placed in front of me one stack at a time. Each one was a challenge filed through the proper legal channels, designed to pull those controls back and force outside review. The language was sharp and precise. No drama, only structure. I read every page before signing. Not because I doubted the team, but because I needed to feel each step. Ink on paper felt stronger than any promise my family had ever made. Next came the corporate side. Requests for immediate inspection, independent review, and transaction lockdown were already prepared. Once submitted, they would trigger automatic oversight and restrict executive movement inside the company accounts. No sudden transfers. No quiet sell-offs. No disappearing numbers. The system would hold everything in place long enough for truth to surface. Odessa then placed a small evidence bag on the table with a storage device inside. It had been recovered from old infrastructure scheduled for disposal. Fragments of vehicle data logs had been preserved through automated backups no one remembered to erase. Partial files, but authenticated. Timestamps matched the night everyone argued about. Chain of custody was already documented. It wasn't a full story yet, but it was a crack in the version used against me. For the first time since my release, I allowed myself a slow breath. Not relief, not victory, just confirmation that the foundation of their story could be tested. Silas outlined the filing order and expected responses. Timelines replaced emotions. Procedure replaced outrage. Every move from this point forward would be measured and recorded. The conference hall was packed, buzzing with excitement and flashing cameras. Jace stepped up confidently, smiling for the crowd, shaking hands with executives, acting like everything was under control. He spoke about growth, innovation, and a new partnership worth $50 million, the kind of announcement that would make headlines and investors cheer. On the surface, it looked perfect, polished, and unstoppable. He had practiced this moment, every gesture and word crafted to maintain the illusion of competence. As he reached for the pen to finalize the contract, the screen behind him flashed red. The card linked to the company account was declined. Murmurs rippled through the room. Jace froze, forcing a smile, trying to cover the error. A subtle panic flickered in his eyes. Cameras caught it all. Every journalist, every investor watching online saw it in real time. Phones buzzed. Alerts flooded inboxes. Vance Cloud assets frozen. Court orders audit. Read the headlines rolling across news sites. The carefully built facade crumbled instantly. The executives on stage glanced at each other, confusion spreading like wildfire. The handshake felt awkward, forced, meaningless. The $50 million partnership evaporated before anyone could react. Investors started calling their brokers, questioning the stability of the company. Social media lit up with speculation and disbelief. The narrative of a capable leader, ready to expand and innovate, collapsed in minutes. What had been projected as growth and reliability was now exposed as weakness and mismanagement. From the back of the room, I watched the chaos unfold through live feeds. Every step of their preparation, every confident word, fell apart because the foundation of their story was false. The stock price began to tumble immediately, after hours trading amplifying the damage. What Jace and my family had counted on as control became a public spectacle of failure. The reputation they had built over years, polished and curated, was unraveling in a single moment. Whispers of fraud, mismanagement, and oversight spread faster than any planned press release. No one could hide behind rehearsed smiles or speeches anymore. The crowd scattered, some whispering about the unexpected turn, others frantically calling offices and legal teams. The press smelled vulnerability, and every camera and microphone captured it. Jace's confident posture had shifted into rigid tension. He stumbled over explanations, offering vague reassurances that sounded hollow. The public perception, carefully managed for decades, was gone. The illusion of control was replaced with doubt and exposure. The collapse was public, undeniable, and irreversible. Every move my family had counted on to cement power now amplified the truth waiting to surface. In that moment, the first cracks in their empire turned into a visible, unstoppable fracture. The morning light brought a storm of a different kind. A leak from the court filings spread across every news feed, every alert buzzing on phones and computers. Breyer's medical records were public, and they told a story no one had expected. The documents revealed she had experienced a silent miscarriage weeks before the accident, something caused by a condition she already had. The crash had left her shaken and bruised, but it had not ended her pregnancy. The truth was undeniable, stamped in charts, dates, and reports. The headline hit like a hammer: Vance frame-up? Sister's conviction based on fabricated tragedy. The world began to question everything they had been told. Outside my parents' home, reporters swarmed, cameras capturing every reaction, every tense expression. Neighbors peeked through windows, whispers spreading down the street. The carefully controlled image of my family crumbled. Jace, realizing the foundation of their story had vanished, confronted Breyer in the front yard. Voices rose, sharp and bitter, words spilling over fences and into the ears of anyone nearby. The argument was raw, unfiltered, and loud enough for the press to record. The family that had presented a united front for years now appeared fractured, panicked, and exposed. The lies they had built around me were unraveling in public view. Social media exploded. Articles dissected every detail of the records. Commentators speculated about motives and deceit. Friends, colleagues, and investors who had believed in Jace's leadership began questioning their loyalty. The reputation my family had worked so hard to craft evaporated, replaced by suspicion and outrage. Every false testimony, every calculated tear in court now looked deliberate, manipulative, and cruel. The world saw the betrayal in full color, the kind that leaves no room for explanation or excuse. I watched from a distance, letting the moment settle. I did not gloat. I did not celebrate. This was not about revenge yet. It was about truth finally surfacing, about the story bending back to its proper shape. My parents, Jace and Briar, were now trapped in a reality they had tried to control. Their secrets, once hidden behind rehearsed emotions and courtroom performances, were exposed for everyone to see. The balance had shifted, and for the first time in years, the power was no longer theirs. The world knew what they had done, and there was no turning back. The cracks in their family were no longer hidden. The public exposure of lies and financial scrutiny pushed them past the point of coordination. Kieran, once my brother and the CFO of the company, realized the danger he faced if the truth came out. Fearing criminal charges and prison, he reached out quietly, offering a complete handover of evidence in exchange for protection. Emails, shell company records, bank transfers, all the proof of their manipulations and misuse of company funds, landed in our hands. It was a map of deception, showing exactly how my parents had used the business to cover personal indulgences, including Briar's expensive spa trips that had been secretly funded with stolen money. My parents, meanwhile, were flailing. They had relied on appearances and control to hold everything together, but their reputation was collapsing. They called and wrote, framing themselves as victims of Briar and Jace, pleading that they had been manipulated. Their words were desperate, rehearsed, and hollow. I did not answer. There was no room for negotiation. Their attempts to regain sympathy were nothing more than a sign of weakness, a public display of panic. The unity that had once made them formidable was gone, replaced by fear, suspicion, and blame. Jace and Briar, who had orchestrated so much, found themselves under pressure from every direction. Each misstep, every hidden transaction, now exposed through Kieran's cooperation, forced cracks to appear in their relationship. Arguments and confrontations became public knowledge, leaking through social media and whispered to the press by insiders who had previously been kept in check. The image of a coordinated, untouchable family was shattered. Watching it unfold, I felt no joy, only clarity. The tools they had used to isolate me, the alliances they had counted on, were now turned inward. Every lie, every act of betrayal, now worked against them. The desperation in their voices, the tension in their interactions, was proof that the balance of power had shifted. They were no longer a unit. Their structure, once solid and threatening, was fragile and exposed. And in this fracture I saw the path forward. Every secret, every weakness, would be used not recklessly, but deliberately, to ensure that justice and truth finally had the space to settle where it belonged. The family that had tried to destroy me was now destroying itself. The day my conviction was overturned felt unreal. The judge read the decision, citing the new evidence, Kieran's testimony, and the medical records that proved the truth. Years of confinement, humiliation, and betrayal were finally acknowledged, but it was only the first step. Freedom alone was not enough. I had to reclaim what had been taken and make sure no one could hide behind lies again. I filed a civil suit naming everyone involved. It was comprehensive, leaving no gap: wrongful conviction, emotional abuse, deliberate manipulation, and the theft of the company I had built from the ground up. Every document, every page, carefully detailed their actions. It wasn't revenge in the impulsive sense. It was justice delivered through procedure, facts, and law. The court would see the full picture, the chain of deceit and greed that had cost me 3 years of my life and nearly destroyed my legacy. At the same time, public attention mounted. News outlets dissected the case, highlighting the inconsistencies and the new evidence. The district attorney, pressured by scrutiny and outrage, began opening criminal investigations into perjury, falsified police reports, and embezzlement. Suddenly, my family, who had once orchestrated every move against me, were being watched, questioned, and recorded. The balance of power shifted completely. Those who had hunted me for their gain were now exposed, vulnerable, and accountable. I watched as the media covered hearings, leaks of documents, and official statements. Friends and colleagues who had supported them began distancing themselves, realizing how deeply the deception ran. The same system that had once failed me now moved to correct itself, and the people who had relied on influence, intimidation, and lies could not escape scrutiny. Through it all, I stayed focused on the steps ahead. Emotions were present, yes, but they did not cloud judgment. Every motion, every filing, every legal strategy was deliberate, precise, and calculated. This was not about satisfaction. It was about restoring order and proving that truth could not be buried forever. The hunters had become the hunted, and the tables had turned completely. The people who once controlled my life were now at the mercy of the system, their misdeeds laid bare, and the world finally seeing the reality they had tried so hard to hide. Justice, slow and methodical, had begun to catch up with them, and there was no escape. The first morning back at headquarters felt different from every memory I had of it. The lobby was brighter, redesigned, stripped of the old branding choices I once approved in a hurry. People looked up when I walked in, not with pity or doubt, but with steady respect. No applause, no scene, just quiet acknowledgement. That was exactly how I wanted it. This was not a victory parade. It was a reset. My office sat at the top floor, rebuilt with clean lines and open space. The desk faced the windows instead of the wall now. The city stretched out in front of me, wide and moving, full of noise I could not hear through the glass. Atlanta looked the same, but I did not. I understood risk differently. I understood trust differently. Every decision ahead would be slower, verified, and documented. Instinct had built my first empire. Discipline would protect this one. On the side wall hung a shadow box with a rough slab of concrete inside. Carved across it were 1,095 small lines. No label, no explanation for visitors. Only I knew what it measured. Not time served, but focus earned. Patience learned the hard way. Whenever a meeting ran long or a problem felt heavy, I could look at it and remember what real pressure felt like. Nothing in this building could match it. The legal outcomes moved forward without my presence in the room. Financial penalties were enforced. Properties and luxury accounts were liquidated to satisfy the judgment. Charges progressed through the courts where they belonged. I did not attend the hearings. I did not give interviews. Closure did not require a front row seat. Consequences did their work whether I watched or not. Inside the company, I changed the structure. No more unchecked authority under one family line. Independent oversight, rotating audit teams, shared signature controls. Promotions based on record, not loyalty. I met teams in small groups and listened more than I spoke. Stability is built through systems, not personalities. That lesson cost me years, so I made sure we paid it forward in safeguards. Sometimes people ask if I feel whole again. The honest answer is no. Some damage does not reverse. But broken does not mean weak. Experience can harden judgment and sharpen vision. The earlier version of me built something big. The current version knows how to defend it. I stand at the window at the end of each day and watch the lights come on across the skyline. The company is mine again, but more important, my direction is mine. The account is settled. The story is complete. What remains is forward motion, built on truth, structure, and earned strength. This was no longer about defending myself. It was about building a clear record, step by step, until the truth had nowhere left to hide. The first move was no longer an idea. It was already in motion,